Hello, I'm Lola Stone and this is Handmade Originals. Today's project is going to be a bit of a departure for me because normally if I'm making clothes, and yes, we are going to be making a dress today, I like to just start from scratch and drape straight onto the model. I don't like following other people's patterns, and I certainly don't like just doing what somebody else has already done. But over the Christmas period I saw this edition of Vogue, if I can show you, and it has this fabulous Dolce Gabbana dress on the front, which is actually an underdress with an overdress from tulle with applique on the front. Now I love the dress, I love the applique and I love the tulle, but what I wasn't so keen on was the very pale colour, and I thought this would look much more dramatic in a very dark green with bright red roses. And I was fortunate enough to find this fabric, which has, as you can see, some fabulous dark red roses on it, and I thought that would make a marvellous applique. So then I had to think about how I was going to make an underdress, and I'm a bit lazy, it has to be said, when it comes to making things. I always try and think, is there a quicker or easier way of doing it? So I decided I was going to make the underdress from t-shirts. Bear with me. So I got this t-shirt, which is just an ordinary cotton vest top, and I got another t-shirt with sleeves, this man's t-shirt, to make the skirt part to be attached and go on the bottom, because clearly this is not long enough for an underdress. This was the original colour, which, as you can see, is quite different to the colour that this is now. So the reason I've actually dyed this, and I've also dyed the other t-shirt without the sleeves, which is this one, so that it's a much yellower green. And the reason I've done this is because when you put the tulle, in fact I've used what's called power mesh, which sounds awfully sporty, but the reason I've used this is because it's same effect as tulle, but it's very stretchy, look. And so as this is a cotton stretch knit underneath, you need to have two things with the same stretchiness, one on top of the other, otherwise they'll fight. So if you look at, I'm going to bring this a little bit closer so that you can see. Whoops. If you look at those two greens, when I put this against the original colour of the t-shirt here, you can see this looks much bluer. Whereas if I put it against the t-shirt which I've dyed in a yellow bath, it actually fits in much better now. So that will look much better on the underdress. Now this is there are lots of dyes on the market. This is the dye which I use, which is just a cold dye, which is very easy to use. So what I'm going to do now is, I'll hold this up here because I don't think you'll be able to see the bottom of the dummy. That's going to be the skirt part of the dress. So I'm going to cut off this top part here, and I'm going to attach this onto the bottom of this t-shirt here, so that we then have the underdress. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, although I'm aiming to make it perfect, because when we have the power mesh over the top, that will actually provide quite a bit of disguise for any little errors which have crept in, particularly when we're going to sort of pleat it down the side here to create these lovely dark shadows going across. So the next time you see this, I will have the overhead camera and I will show how I'm going to cut this off, cut this in half and make it into one dress rather than two t-shirts. Cut with the cutter. Right, so that's done. Now I'm going to take off that, whoops, still haven't cut through, okay, cut. Right, so that's nice and flat. That should be nice and flat. And then what I'm going to do, because I want this to be a nice flat join, and I do realise this is wider here, so I'm going to use this special pen. This is a sort of dressmaking pen, and it comes out blue on the fabric, but actually when you put water on it, it disappears completely. So I'm just going to run that down. This bottom piece is one continuous tube. It doesn't have any seams at all. So what I'm going to do is just put in some seams at the side to make it match up better with the top half. Just make this. So that will come down like this, and it will all join flat. Now, what I'm going to do, which I hope will work very well, is to join these using this piece of fusible interfacing, which is what it's ordinary dressmaker's interfacing, except that, I don't know if you can see, it's got these little black or grey bobbles on it of glue, and when you iron like that, it effectively glues this fabric to this and this fabric to this half here, and therefore you should get a nice flat join. I'm not going to leave it just like that, but that will be the starting point. So I'm going to just cut this here. I'm going to get my iron and I'm going to press down on that. So I have my two t-shirts here cut in one straight line. I've butted the edges as tightly together as I can so that they're edge to edge, not overlapping, just edge to edge. And then I'm going to put this with the bobbly side down where all the glue is, face down like that, so it's half on each t-shirt with the join in the middle. And then I'm going to iron it. I have never done this before, so I don't know if it's going to work. It just struck me as a possibility, so let's just try it out. It could all end up being a bit of a disaster. However, one lives and learns. If you don't try things, you'll never know if they work. So let's see. So I've just finished ironing the other side. This is the side you saw me iron, and then I turned it over and I've done the same thing on this side. This is not the only thing that's going to keep it together. This is just to make sure that the edges stay like that when I sew them. So if I can just turn it in the other way, I'll show you. Can you see here? There's a slight, there we are. So it's put the edges nicely butted together so that when I put them under the sewing machine, I'm going to zigzag across here. So I should end up with a nice flat seam, which isn't too bulky, and the two edges hopefully will just kind of merge into each other like that. Before I do any of that though, because that's quite a sort of delicate hold there, just holding those two bits together, what I'm going to do is just, using this line I've drawn here, stitch down here so that we have one continuous seam down the side of the dress, and then when I'll turn it inside out to sew round on a zigzag, I can go continuously all the way round like that. And what I'll do is I'll do all of that, and then I'll come back and I'll show you, and we'll see whether or not it's fallen apart or whether it actually works. Welcome back. I've finished sewing the two pieces of t-shirt together, and you can see here it's a nice flat seam. I have pressed it so it's particularly nice and flat. At the end of these videos, usually what I do is a reflective piece about what I would have done differently if I were doing it again, and in fact I'm going to do that piece, a little bit of it now, because you won't be able to see this later on and I want to really be able to show you on the dummy. If I was doing this again, I would join the t-shirt not here but actually here, so that I could use more of the bigger t-shirt on the bottom half, and then I'd be able to give it more of a shape and more room in the hips, because at the moment I've been constrained by the width of the smaller t-shirt on the top. I just prefer clothes to be slightly looser. I know some people like them tight and fitting, in which case go ahead like this, but I think if the join was here, there's also a greater chance of hiding it with the overlay which is coming next. Moving on, before I show you how I'm going to put the overlay on of the black power mesh, I just wanted to show you the sort of theory behind what I'm going to do. Forgive me, this is a little bit of a lecture. If you look at these three images, this one is a flat two-dimensional pot. This one has just shading on it and so has some depth to it, and this one has shading and light. And whether you're talking about clothes on the body or makeup on your face, Adding shade and light are the most effective ways of either making areas retreat and seem darker and smaller, or bringing them forward if you add light to make them seem more pronounced. So for example, you might want to add a lighter colour or shine to make something more pronounced, and you might want to make it matte or darker to make it retreat. So if you apply that to the body, and clothing really is sculpture on the body. If you look at this, this is just a plain dress like this, looked at from the back. Now, when I overlay with mesh, what I'm going to do is pleat at the sides so that where the pleats lie, you'll see a darker arrow type of shape. And when you look at it on here, I think you'll see that that actually makes the waist appear narrower. So if you look at these two side by side, I think you can see that this one has a narrower silhouette around the waist than this one, and it's simply because of the shading that we add. So I can just show what I mean with this mesh. If I'm going to pleat it at the sides like this is an over exaggeration of what I'm going to do, you'll see that I get this sort of dart shape coming in like this, which will narrow this area here around the waist. So this is what I'm going for when I'm going to pin it onto the dummy, and that's what I'm going to show you next. So I'm going to come down here so that you can sort of see me and the dress, see the dress closer up. I've very roughly pinned, you can see here at the sides, the different pleats that I want to make, and I think here, this is where I depart from the Dolce and Gabbana inspiration, because I think what they did was just gather all the way down this seam, so they had kind of continuous ruching all the way across, whereas I think it's more interesting and more effective if you create shadows with the black overlay and you just place them exactly where you want them to have most impact on the body. What I'm now going to do, I'll do the shoulder seams, I'm going to pin the back overlay, and I'm going to lay it on the table before I sew the sides together so that you can see what it looks like, and then hopefully we can move on to putting in the sleeves, which is the bit I hate, but anyway, we'll get to that when we come to it. So I haven't actually sewn the side seams yet, but I just wanted to show it to you like this first of all. I've laid it out flat. I've made some slight adjustments to the pins at the side to make sure that everything is nicely laid out. And I have sewn the top edges on one edge there, on one seam, but I haven't turned it inside out and done the French seam yet. What I'm now going to do is sew from the bottom edge up to the top, and the reason I'm going in that direction is because the pleats are all open at the top. So I'm sewing in the direction of the pleat. If I was sewing this way, I'd be pulling them open as I sewed. And what I'm going to sew here is about 1/2 centimetre to 1 centimetre away from the edge of the dress. I'm not sewing through the green dress, I'm just sewing the overdress at the moment, but I'm using the green dress edge here as a marker for where my seam will go. So I'm actually going to pin the overdress to the dress, the green dress, too many dresses here, so that as I go along I know that I'm just about the width of my finger away from the edge of that dress, and then I can turn it inside out and sew again, and then I'll have a nice closed seam, nice French seam down the side of the overdress, and then I shall come back and show it to you. I'm only going to sew up to here, to the bottom of the armhole, because for this bit here we're going to make a proper armhole seam and a sleeve, which we will come to later. I've cut out a small hole at the top. I will probably cut a bigger hole than that, but I just cut that at the moment to give myself an idea of where it would go. I'll come back to you when I've done some sewing. It's very, very windy here, which is probably what you can hear in the background. Now, I hope that you can see I've put some white card underneath it to help. Here is my sewing line. I've just sewn all the way up this edge here and on the other edge, and now what I'm going to do, taking my life into my hands, is cutting close to that edge all of the surplus fabric off. So I'm going to, can you see, it's about, I guess that's about 4 millimeters here, and I'm going to cut all the way up here, and then I'm going to turn it inside out like this and sew it like that, trapping the raw edges in that seam there, and that is the French seam that I was talking about earlier. I'll come back and show you how I got on when I finished doing that. Hello, I'm back. So what have we got so far? This is the dress with the overdress. I haven't finished the sleeves, and actually when I looked at it like this I was thinking I could have cut it with using much wider piece of material in one piece and actually have the sleeves hanging down in one piece, but I'm going to cut this off, and the way I'm going to make the sleeves is I'm using, this is the sleeve which came off the large t-shirt at the beginning, and what I've done is I've tried this on, and this is the wrong jumper to try it on with, but you can see it's just a little bit short because it's got the cuff here, so I'm going to open this up, which I've done here with the other sleeve. I'm going to use that as a pattern to cut out my sleeve for the dress. I'm going to make it just a little bit longer at the bottom so that it comes down to about here, because I can always shorten it but I can't cut it longer. Just to show you, this is the side. I've pinned it to the dress here, but it won't be pinned obviously, so you can see all the little pleats I put in, and this is the back, and I'm actually going to put a zip in so that it's easier to put on and take off. I've put the zip to here because I'm going to cut this down probably to about there, and when I've done all of that I shall bring it back and show you. Hello, well we're getting there, nearly finished. This is the zip which I put in at the back. I really took the easy path with this zip because it's a surface mounted zip and it's not a concealed zip. All I did was I actually just sewed down and then turned the t-shirt inside out, cut the inside and then sewed it back on itself. Just if we're going to go for those reflective moments, something I should have done and didn't was take out the label in the original t-shirt, so it was a little bit less bulky there, but anyway that's done now, so that will just be concealed by the zip. I haven't cut this bit yet, which I will do. I have done the sleeves, if I can just show them to you. What I actually decided to do, when I tried the sleeve on before I finished the insides, this seam here, and I realised that actually it was much too big on my arm, so I cut about that much, about 2 centimetres off from this part and made it narrower. And then what I've done, I made it longer than I needed, and then inside the French seam, which is a sort of enclosed channel now going up the inside of the sleeve, I've worked in 2 rows of shearing elastic so that when I put my arm in it I have that sort of ruched effect, if you can see. So the next thing I've got to do is to decorate it, and this is the fun part. So I've started cutting out the roses from this lovely elasticated material like this. So what I'm going to do is decorate it with roses like this, and if you can see, it was really worth getting the right shade of green because I think it makes such a difference. And this is, I think I might use this cluster of roses here, and I'm going to put other roses elsewhere on the dress, but I'm not going to just sew them on like that. What I'm going to do is I think I'm going to zigzag round a black edge all the way around the edge. It's quite a lot of sewing to do, and then I'll see what it looks like, put just a few red sequins around here just to give this particular cluster here, which is sort of the cluster your eye is most drawn to, a little bit more pizzazz. Hello! Ta-da! And here is the final finished, or virtually finished, dress. You can see this is how I chose to put the applique on. I put a piece here. In fact, this is 3 pieces sewn together, so don't be constrained by the fabric that you're cutting your applique out from. You can cut and rearrange and bend it to your will so that you have exactly the shape that you want. This is one piece here, this is another piece I think to here, that's one piece, that's another little piece, and this leaf here is a separate piece. So literally I just cut the pieces I wanted and formed the shape that I wanted, and then I've got another piece here, so it's following the flow of the flowers down and round. That comes round just under the bottom, and then it carries on here and then comes back round the front of the dress at the bottom. Now you may have seen I whizzed past this, but this bit I'm particularly pleased with. I wanted something in the middle at the back, and I quite like the idea of putting in something that's sort of the shape that quite a few people have of tattoos over their shoulders. So I wanted that kind of shape, but of course with the zip in the way that was a bit of a problem. So what I did was, this is 3 pieces here, that's 1, that's 2, and then this is a 3rd piece here. And with this 3rd piece I have faced it with medium thickness interfacing, and I've put 2 poppers here so that they can literally just pop there and there to hold it in place. It looks like it's complete, and I think that just adds a little extra something. I've also, at the top of the zip, I've turned the edges over and I've put in a hook and eye to hold the zip nice and straight on the back. It's the details, I always think, that make such a big difference to whatever it is you're dealing with. And the interesting thing I think about details is, just a bit of philosophy from me, they say the devil is in the detail, but then they also say God is in the detail. So what is that? Some sort of cosmic fight over trivia? Well, I think the one thing it does emphasise is that it's actually the detail that's important, otherwise people wouldn't be squabbling over it. So I think it's really important to make sure you just look at it and get the fine minutiae right. Not to the extent where you drive yourself mad, obviously, but just make sure you cast a critical eye over whatever it is you've made. I just wanted to show you the sleeves. It looks so much better with an arm inside it, because then you get the translucent effect of it, which I think just looks lovely, and you can sort of push them up any length you like. So I wanted to examine the differences between the dress which inspired all of this dress, and the dress which I finally made. Now this dress, to me, I love the applique, but I really don't like this colour here, because it's sort of a nude colour, and I think that, what does that mean? So she's supposed to be naked but for some red flowers over, and I find that sort of colour making her look vulnerable and passive, and she's also seated in this very passive but ornamental way, and I don't think modern young women want to see themselves like that anymore. And the other thing about the ruching is they've taken the ruching all the way down all the seams, and I think it just makes too much fabric, whereas actually I think the whole point about ruching is the shadow it adds to the edge, and of course because it's nude it doesn't really make a big deal of difference on this. On the dress which I've made, however, she says, rival to Dolce & Gabbana, so on the dress I've made, I think this is not a passive dress. This is a dress for an active woman, not in a sense that it's an overtly sexual dress with everything on show. It's actually quite modest and demure, but it certainly has an in control type feel about it. This is very much an I am woman, I am an active person, and I control what goes on in my life, and I just love this. I also love, with, she says, of her own dress, I love when you turn round that a dress has as much impact as you walk away as it does when it walks towards you. The other big difference between the two dresses is, of course, this dress retails at £2,750, and this dress, I haven't quantified how many hours I've spent on this, but quite a few. But the raw materials, the fabric for this, for the power mesh, and the 2 t-shirts probably come in at under £50, so that's also a very big difference. Obviously it's up to you which one you prefer. I'm just about to go up to see my daughter now, and I made this with her in mind, so I shall try it on her and see what she thinks. Have a go yourself. Yeah, so much hard work.